York. So welcome, Eric. Thanks for joining today.
Thanks for having me, Dan. Great to be here.
Great, and I'm pleased to have Eric on because if you didn't know, we've actually met in person before last year when I was in New York for 5 days to do a piano competition, and we had a nice few hours together.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that was cool.
great.
Yeah, so this is our second meeting really, but this time virtual because of the ongoing situation in the world, and of course because I'm here in Brazil at the moment. So Eric, I just wanted to start off by asking you a little bit about your background. How did you get into music and playing piano?
Sure. Let me think. I'll start at the beginning, I guess.
Okay.
I I had a piano that belonged to my great grandfather, and I lived in my grandma's house. I remember they were on the top level, and we lived on the bottom. So I would go
Oh, cool.
upstairs and play on the Steinway, just fooling around, and um, I think my grandma was the one that kind of taught me some very basic melodies. And I also had a toy piano that I remember the keys would light up. So,
Yeah.
I learned, really basic things like Lightly Row or Mary Had a Little Lamb. I was learning them by rote from this toy, and I think
Oh,
I
cool.
impressed the music teacher at my elementary school that I could pick out tunes on the piano. So that was sort of how it started. We do have some funny home movies of me. I think I was like 2 years old. We had like a toy piano next to the Steinway, and
Oh
my
yeah.
mom used to practice Furlise and Clementi sonatinas. I don't think she really ever got farther than like attempting the first movement of the Moonlight Sonata. But we have some video of me kind of imitating her. It's like if the music was fast, I would play fast. If it was slow, I'd slow
Yeah.
down. It's sort of hilarious. I'm not, getting the notes right, but it's kind of a cool document that I have.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Maybe you can
So
upload that one day. Who knows?
yeah, I have to get my grandma to send me it. But yeah, then I guess my mom was like, well, we need to get him a teacher. And so I remember the first teacher we went to was a group class. This
Yeah.
was in Long Island, New York, by the way. I was always in the
Okay.
New York area, but first 10 years of my life we lived on Long Island.
Yes.
And the group class was kind of, it was fun, but I was more advanced than the other kids, so I think I was like hyperactive. Like I was playing on the pianos and I
Yeah.
couldn't pay attention, and it didn't work out. Then my mom brought me to a local teacher. It was very, it felt like I was going to a doctor's office. He was very stern and very crusty,
Oh
and
yeah.
when I look back on it, it was so bizarre. He would give me a paper that had like code on it, like 1 2 3 2 1, 1 2 3 4 3 2 1, and
Yes.
he was just having me learn like fingerings, I suppose, and everything started on a G scale. It was like the most bizarre teaching, and
Yeah.
I remember he would slap my back if I didn't sit up straight. So that, I don't know. I think after like the third lesson, I didn't want to go back.
Yeah.
So
That doesn't
my mom would,
sound like totally. I don't know.
yeah,
Totally
and
legal.
then
Really.
yeah, it wasn't a good experience. Especially because I loved piano and
Yeah.
I didn't even want to go. So then the elementary school music teacher, he was great. Everybody loved him. Very like charismatic guy, very funny. And when the option came up that he could come over after school once a week teach me piano, it was like having a celebrity come to your house because he was like the
Yes.
most popular teacher at the school. So that actually was a good experience. He kind of had a good blend of giving me a solid foundation, but also feeding my appetite for more difficult music. I remember we did, like method books, but I also was working simultaneously on like, Clementi Sonatina or later on Farlise
Yeah.
and, all these like basic piano rep staples. And I did the NISMA exams. I forget what that stands for, but
Okay.
something New York State music. You know,
Yeah.
so that was my first experience preparing something for an exam, and then we moved to New Jersey because of my dad's job. Anyway, so when we moved to New Jersey, I didn't really have a teacher for a year,
Right.
and I sort of started teaching myself. I remember I still have Chopin scores where I would write the notes in
Yes.
one by one because my reading was not great, you know, but I was very determined to learn. I remember the E minor prelude was like one of the first things I discovered.
Oh, cool.
Again, these were like my great grandfather's scores,
Yes.
and nobody played them, and I was fascinated by the way they just looked on the page, so
Yeah.
beautiful and so difficult. And I remember within like a couple years, I went from trying to read, you know, E minor prelude to wanting to tackle Hungarian Rhapsody #2 and La
Yeah.
Campanella and all this crazy. So we found another teacher with whom I worked basically through age 13 to 17 so up to the end of high school. So and then I went to Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh, where I had a bunch of different teachers. Should I talk about the college now? Or
Yeah, of course. Just
yeah.
let us know about who you studied with, who influenced you the most,
Yeah.
really.
So in university, I had basically like three teachers. First was Enrique Graf, who was a pupil of Leon Fleischer.
Okay.
And, you know, he's like a very solid, no-nonsense musician, very classical in his orientation. But, you know, he how do I say it? It was a little bit difficult because he traveled from Charleston every 2 weeks, so I
Oh, yeah.
didn't see him very much. I remember he mostly had graduate students, and I don't know if he was the best to have for being an undergraduate. Like, I really, even though I could play and I made a good impression, I think I needed more structure. Like, I didn't learn enough classical sonatas. I played all this Brahms and Liszt and Chopin, but I hadn't played
Yes.
Haydn and Mozart. You know, that stuff I neglected, and Bach too. And he wasn't really like into scales and arpeggios. He was more, you know, working in the music technically. But
Yeah.
I do suspect he had some strange. Well, I don't suspect. He did have strange technical ideas, and I suspect they came from Leon Fleischer. And I did have an injury my junior year.
Oh,
I
yeah.
sort of blame him for that. But, you know, I was trying in good faith to follow everything he said, and, you know, he accused me of doing these things too much. Like, you know, I wasn't, you know, gradual enough in my
I see.
approach. But, you know, I was trying to be a good student and working hard. But I hurt my hand actually with him. And then my master's degree, I stayed at Carnegie Mellon, but I switched teachers to Sergei Shepkin, and
Yes.
he studied with Russell Sherman at New England Conservatory, who I also know has had, you know, some students who got injured. Like I remember later on, when I mentioned my teachers to this woman, she was like, "Thank heavens you can still play," you know, based on those teachers.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah.
Yes.
So Sherman, but then he studied in St. Petersburg. That's where he trained, and he studied for a year, I think, with Grigory Sokolov, believe it or not,
Yeah.
who I heard was like the nastiest teacher ever. Like it's weird because he spoke with reverence about him,
Yeah.
but yet like it sounded like it was a traumatic experience to work with him. So I don't think he was, you know, cut out for teaching. So, and at the same time, I had coachings with Earl Wild, that was a great experience because he's, you know, an incredible pianist, and I got to meet him towards the end of his life.
Yes.
And Ilana Vered, she's a pretty well-known Israeli pianist. She stopped playing in public. Like, I mean, she had a big career, but sort of curtailed it decades ago, and now she has a music festival in Perugia that she invited me to, etc. they were sort of polar opposites. I remember Earl Wild was like, as much as he's known as being like the last romantic, he was more of like a head guy. Like he would talk to me about like conducting, the singing line, like where's the phrase going, where's it coming from, what is the orchestration you have in mind, and the result was always like less physical work, but more focusing your mind and getting the result. With Ilana Vered, I remember she was like a visceral person. Like if you weren't like suffering, it wasn't good somehow. Like I just remember with her, I mean, she was a solid musician, but I just remember that, you know, if you were taking it easy, like she was not happy. So it was sort of like a different experience. I don't know how to explain it better than that, but I got things from both of them, definitely. But since then, I've played for many different teachers. I suppose that I've had a bit of a, a complex about technique. You know, I guess are there any pianists that don't have, you know, insecurities about technique at certain points in their life? So I've always been, you know, trying to work with different people to figure out, you know, how to conquer these, you know, unbelievably difficult pieces. And at this point, I feel like I'm pretty much, you know, like I'm probably done with my training. I still play for people, like coachings, you know, if I have a recital coming up or want to run something. But, you know, at a certain point, I had to kind of cut the cord and be like, all right, like I've learned a lot, so now I have to use it. So.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I guess we all have those certain pieces that we tried a lot before and then we just had to leave them for a while because of a technical issue or something else.
That's true.
Yeah,
I found sometimes pieces you leave for a while and you come back to them mysteriously, the impossible becomes possible.
Yes.
I've had that happen before. Yeah.
So yeah, that links nicely to my next question. So how long do you usually study a new piece before you first perform it as part of a program, or you might do it as a one-off performance?
It's a good question. I think it seems like a lot of the new pieces I've done in the last few years, I've had about 1 to 2 months to prepare them, which is kind of short.
Yeah, that's very short, I think.
Yeah, but that's not. Those are like newer things, you know. A lot of the time, I'm rehashing old things that I've played for years. So, I mean, the Goldbergs, which is like my current project, I've been working on them now since the beginning of April. And now, what is it, mid-July? So, like, April, June, July. So, we're looking at, like, 4 months. And I don't think I would dare play them in public for at least a few more months, you know? But, I'm trying to think, like...
Because I know, like, when we're studying at college and before, like, we might start working on concertos as well. And for me personally, I love it when I've spent a few years at least on one already, and then I get the opportunity to play it, and you've done that good foundational work already on the music.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think I was thinking of some recent experiences where, for example, I played Beethoven Triple Concerto.
Yes.
And I basically prepared it in about, it was like a month and a half. You know, I didn't have much time. Yes. So, I mean, it's not the hardest concerto, but it's not an easy piece either.
No. But you don't play that from memory usually as well, do you?
Yeah, exactly. You don't play by memory, that's true. But, you know, when I had Chopin F Minor last year, that's a piece that I've looked at since I was like 15, you know, so I can't really say like I started it. I probably did start looking at it 2 months before the performance, but I prepared in 2018 when I did that international Chopin competition.
Oh
Sorry,
yeah.
it's raining. It's
Oh,
raining really hard. I don't know
oh.
if it's no and torrential rain here right now. So
Wow.
the F minor was kind of an old piece that I was bringing back.
Yes.
The Green Concerto I played in 2014 in Florida, and let's see, I played that in April. I think I started it in the summer before that year, so I had a good like 10 months on that piece, I would say.
Yeah. And I found if you're asked to play a piece that you've already worked on, it's always nice as well to have, I think, at least like 5 months or more notice, or organisation before as well. Because I remember the first concerto I did was Beethoven's First, and I had about 5 months when I was told they wanted it, and luckily I'd worked on it before anyway.
Yeah.
So that helped really.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, I mean, I guess a lot of the stuff I've done recently, chamber music and some Baroque stuff I did on harpsichord. With that, I usually just had like a month or so to prepare. But yeah, they're not usually memorized. So
yes.
But yeah, sure. Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say you perform on harpsichord as well, don't you? Sometimes.
I do. Yeah. I have a harpsichord, but it's in storage right now. But I love the harpsichord. Yeah.
And how do you find switching from playing piano to the harpsichord? Because it's a different touch, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah. I try to give myself a few weeks at least to sort of adjust your nervous system, and I think I tend to overplay the keys, because they're lighter and they're shallower, and you don't. It's interesting. We have this idea of harpsichord technique being like this very like high fingered kind of digital thing, like but I've had lessons with some harpsichordists, and it was quite the contrary. They wanted me to have the finger on the key to draw the sound out of it, like so you hear a singing quality. Like it's actually a very singing instrument. And I was surprised at that. Like it wasn't about like lifting high and attacking it at all. Because then you get a thud and you hear more of the key sound than the actual sound instrument.
I see.
So I was surprised at that. But I think it's much better, to play.
Yeah, and that seems like the kind of approach Glenn Gould used to play as well on the piano.
Like closer to the key.
So like basically he was already on the notes, then he would just play the key without any lifting or anything.
Right. Yeah, I know he did that like finger tapping technique. I never tried it, but it's similar because there's like it's very economical, I guess you could say. It's like the minimum effort, just the fingers going down. Yeah.
So that so you were talking about the Goldbergs. Now you want to play a small part of that today for us.
Probably just the aria, I think. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, thanks for playing that. That was really lovely.
Sure, thank you.
So I hope you, well, how far have you got with the rest of the piece, really?
Well, I pretty much memorized the whole thing now, but
Oh, wow.
there are certain sections that the hand crossings in
Yeah.
the two manual ones, I have solutions, but I have to practice them a little more because they're, I kind of redistributed a few notes to assist, and they're not quite panned out, I could say. But they work. Like, I found solutions that work. I just have to, like, polish them up because how do I explain it? It's like physically easier, but it's a mental thing,
Yes.
So because I have to relearn it a little bit.
Yeah, I found that like when you work on such a big piece for a while, sometimes all you need to do is like change a finger in somewhere, and that solves a lot of things. Because like we get so used to playing it one way, and then you just got to make those adjustments again, and that obviously that's an ongoing process, isn't it? Really.
Totally, yeah. I mean, every day there's some new options that reveal itself. It's kind of like a chess game, there's always like a move you can make, but it's not always apparent at first.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I don't really write them down anymore. I used to be very religious about writing like every note, every finger down, but now I change them, so like it's kind of, I don't really write them down unless it's maybe a couple here and there,
Yes.
So,
yeah, that's interesting because I had one teacher who believed if you learnt the piece really well, you didn't need to write the finger in, and then another would write optional fingerings, so you'd still have a bit of choice, but then you'd have to see which is the best for you to use. Really.
Yeah. Right. I do have, if I can show you my score, I'll flip the camera for a minute.
Okay, yeah.
I do analyze it quite a bit. Like, you can see all of these like colors that I use, and the cannons. Let me see if I can show you.
It's interesting to see.
I kind of mark the voices in different colors, and then I play them in combinations. Like, this was that Fugato and French Overture card. And let me see if there was one where it went really crazy. The canon at the unison.
Yeah.
I had this weird idea because whatever happens here is replicated in the next measure. So it was like blue, blue, red, red, yellow, yellow, and I don't want to bore you with it, but that canon was maybe the hardest one for me, even though it's the first one and you think, oh, it's at the unison, no big deal. But it's very, and it begins so, innocently with the, but it gets complicated very quickly.
Well, that's a great, obviously it's a great workout for analysing music as well.
Totally, yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you as well, do you have any composers that you like to play more than others?
Well, I definitely would put Bach at the, towards the top of my list. He's a great love of mine.
Yeah.
And I know it sounds kind of prosaic to say that, but I have friends that don't like Bach, it's almost a mystery to me. Yeah. I don't judge them, but sometimes I'm like, wow, I don't get it. How can you like not love Bach? He's just the best, So I don't know what it is about his music that it appeals to certain people and not others. Some people hear it and they just think, oh, it's like a typewriter, it's all like, da da dun 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 da da dun da da dun, and it just goes on. But to me, it's like the most inventive composer ever. He never runs out of ideas. There's so much wealth and beauty. And anyway, okay, so Bach, that's one. But another thing that I thought I'd mention is I do have a penchant for contemporary music, and I feel it's a strong suit of mine.
Yes.
So I enjoy playing premieres by friends of mine that have commissioned some pieces, and
yes.
I feel like some of my best playing has been 20th century repertoire. Like I did the Carter Sonata, I did the Corleano Etude Fantasy, the Barber Sonata. So I love those. Are I mean, Barber is old already. It's like Mozart or something, but not quite. But I do love that stuff, and I feel like I'm in my element playing it.
Okay.
So
Does some of that involve pieces where you have to like pluck the strings and put things inside the piano?
I have done that. Not necessarily, but the piece I mentioned by my friend, his name is Christian Kriegescott, and it's called Les Mat, and it's actually based on the tarot cards, believe it or not. Kind of an odd subject.
Yeah.
But what was I saying? Yeah, one of the pieces requires plucking the strings. It's not a super intense like prepared piano like John Cage. I like that stuff. I haven't done it. I guess partially because of the preparation involved with the piano.
Yeah.
But I like that stuff. I'm not averse to it at all. And I also like Zhebsky, the North American ballade where you have to use your arms in the beginning. That's kind of a piece. I think it's called the Winnsboro Cotton Mill Blues. Yeah, that's an ingenious piece. Anyway.
Yeah, that can be fun to do actually. I think I've done one piece like that, and then at the end I also had to like close the piano lids as well.
Oh, wow, that's interesting.
So that in one way that's kind of satisfying to do as well.
Yeah, sure, yeah. Even then, I think I played Out of Doors by Bartok, and I don't remember if he asks for it, but I used the palm on to play a cluster at the top. I don't remember if that's what he writes to do, or if he just puts the notes like the black keys in one hand.
Yes.
I can't remember, but yeah, it's fun. Definitely.
Yeah, there's definitely is some of that in Bartok, because in his piano sonata, which I've studied that a little, and I think the third movement especially, you got those really big stretches, so you have to
kind of cluster.
Yeah, you have to use the thumb to play like 2 or 3 notes sometimes.
Right,
and things
right,
like
yeah,
that,
exactly.
really.
Yeah. Bartok is one of my favorites too. Now that we mention it, I guess among the more classical canon composers, I love Schumann. He's one of my favorites. Absolutely love his piano solo pieces. Brahms too, and Chopin for sure. But who doesn't love Chopin?
And I just thought of something I wanted to ask you. So, being from New York, do you feel any obligation to perform music like Gershwin or Bernstein?
That's an interesting question. I haven't played any Bernstein. I remember when I did the solo version of Rhapsody in Blue, I felt like this piece really epitomizes New York in the 1920s. I mean, it really captures that spirit. Maybe it is an advantage for me, being from here, feeling like I can imagine the scenery and everything. I don't think necessarily it's an advantage, but it certainly doesn't hurt, being from here. I don't think I feel a compulsion to play that music, and in a way I would like to do more. I have a friend, she's the widow of an American composer, Douglas Townsend. And I played some of his music, and there's a whole scene of I think she calls it the Greenwich Village composer scene from the 20th century, and I was going to do a program of a bunch of these people's a bunch of their music, and that appeals to me definitely.
Yeah,
I'd like to do a project like that if things open up. at some point.
That's interesting. I never heard about you mentioned the Greenwich Village composers.
Yeah, I don't know if it's like a formal, it's not a school of like the Hudson River School of Painting, but
Yeah.
there definitely was a vibrant scene there, like in, I guess, the mid 1900s, and I don't have the names in my head right now, but I could certainly tell you them like later. I'll ask her to send me.
Yeah, that's great because Sorry, I was going to say I did get a chance actually to visit Greenwich Village for a little time when I was in New York.
You did not, or you did?
I did, yeah. On my last day there, someone who knows the city was showing me around.
Oh, great.
It was nice, a lovely Saturday afternoon, and it was pretty warm at that time, still in September.
Yeah, it's a great place to visit.
Yeah.
Definitely one of my favorite spots. Yeah.
Great. So I wanted to talk a bit about live streaming. So, like what we're doing right now, of course, is live streaming, but you have done a lot yourself as well on Periscope, Twitter Live app. So could you tell us about that?
Sure. First of all, thank you for inviting me. It's great to do something collaborative.
Yeah, that's great.
That's an interest of mine, is to collaborate more, because my Periscope is sort of just me,
Yes.
and it started in 2016 as sort of a mindless diversion. I remember a singer friend of mine told me about it.
Yes.
And I never really seriously investigated. I just downloaded it, I turned it on, I started practicing, and I discovered people like watching me practice. And I even tried seeing how far I could take it. I have some scopes where I literally just play like Hanon and scales. And it's kind of amazing that people will watch you do that. So sort of voyeuristic in a way. But anyway, so yeah, Periscope I started way before coronavirus. I've been doing these things for I guess 4 years now, on and off. I sort of go through phases where I'm streaming every day, and I've noticed that when I advertise like a concert, I get featured on their main page, and I've gotten over 100,000 views in one scope. I could count on my hand the number of times that's happened. And if you analyze the stats, it's usually like 30 seconds per viewer. But still, it's kind of cool. Like 150,000 people saw my concert.
Because I was featured once there 3 years ago, and then it just went crazy. All the people coming in, the comments on the screen. Yeah, that was really nice.
And I've made connections with people. I mean, well, I've met you for one thing, but I also met a friend. He's become a good friend of mine. He lives in Florida. He's a rabbi at a synagogue. And how did we, I guess, my email or something, somehow he messaged me, and then we struck up a conversation. And I've had a few people approach me for lessons. Hasn't actually turned into any consistent students yet, but I also don't advertise myself that way. Like, maybe if I said, I'm interested in taking students, that's one thing.
Because it is amazing the reach you can get through live streaming, like on Periscope, and even here on Facebook, the biggest site in the world probably at the moment. Yeah. So.
Yes. Yeah. I think you do you do tutorials, right?
Yeah, I did for a while. I haven't been doing it so much recently, but I did because I had some courses going at those times, so I was like giving introductions to those as well, and that was going well, really.
I was thinking about sort of doing not necessarily tutorials, but like videos where I discuss my journey on working on some of these repertoire, some of the repertoire I'm working on, and also the things that my teachers have shared with me. Like for example, I mean, I've had a lot of amazing experiences in the past year. Like I've played for some some really incredible people, including Andrei Gavrilov in Switzerland. Oh, somebody's calling me. I don't know if it's...
Oh yeah, your video's gone off. Oh, you're back now.
Let me go get back to it. Okay.
Yes.
And you know, I could make a video just discussing like my lesson on, you know, the first ballade with you know, Gavrilov.
Yeah.
Some people I met I went to a festival in Israel last summer.
Yes.
And or like, you know, working on, let's say I'm working on like the double thirds etude, and I had this realization like, oh, this is really working for me. You know, I could discuss that and get feedback. That's sort of one thing I'm thinking about.
Yeah, that is good, because actually I've done a few scopes in the last few months similar to that. So like I'm working on, you know, working on a piece like Rachmaninoff's Third Concerto, and it's amazing how like people love to actually witness the behind the scenes work that you have to do to build that up and get it ready.
Right. Yeah, I've seen, I mean, not to imitate other people, but I know online, like, you have people like Josh Wright.
Yes,
you know, he has a lot of content about, like, you know, new realization and scale playing. Like, I think it could help you.
Yes.
Or, like, I think Tiffany Poon does videos of her practicing, you know,
yes.
Gets hundreds of thousands of views.
Yeah.
Not that, like, I want to just, you know, copy them, but clearly there's an interest in seeing how people work, you know.
Definitely, yes.
Yeah. And it's also just, like, sharing insights, you know. I think it's good. So, yeah.
That's really good. So, you mentioned some competitions that you did. So, do you want to tell us about a few of those, including the one you did in Poland 2 years ago, wasn't that?
Yeah, sure. I'll go through them briefly. Let's see. So, yeah, the 2019, I did a bunch of smaller ones. I mean, I'm too old now for most of the big ones, like Chopin and Tchaikovsky, Queen Elizabeth. I'm 34 now, by the way.
Okay.
So, but I do know there are quite a few that don't have age limits. I think more than ever, there are like a bunch of them.
Yes.
And there are some that are like maybe 30, 36 too. Especially in Europe and Italy. Italy has so many piano competitions.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah, so in 2019, let's see what I do. I did the Chopin competition in Hartford. I was a finalist there. I was one of the top 6. I got like an honorable mention down.
Oh, wow.
And then I was there was a Paderewski competition.
Yeah.
I think it's in Connecticut, and I got the second prize there. Those were smaller,
right.
You know, but still they were good, kind of like training grounds to bigger ones. I went to the Lyon piano competition last summer. It was sort of a stressful event because it was so hot and humid, and I don't know. I'm American. There's like air conditioning everywhere. In Paris and Lyon, like they don't really have air conditioning. So it was. I just remember I was playing. I was wearing a suit, and I was playing Islame, and I started with the mazurka, and then I played the Vogel als Prophet from the Phoracines by Schumann, and then the in Islame, and I was just sweating through my shirt by the end of that. It was a good experience. I made some friends. There's a girl I know from Facebook, and we just happened to notice like we're both in this competition, so we started chatting like after we played, and you know, remained friends after that. It's funny. It's a small community in the long run. I mean, in the grand scheme of things. So that was a fun experience. Although I didn't make it to the next round. Too bad. But there's sort of like a lottery, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I found when I did the competition in New York last September, like I had to play Bach, which I don't play at all, really in concert. So that was a really good training for me to get back into like playing a fugue, a prelude and fugue, you know, because I never really performed those much at all, especially from memory as well.
Do you feel that like they're properly belonging more on harpsichord, clavichord, or is it just not the music you like to play in public so much?
Well, I think I've just been too busy with other music, like playing Chopin, Rachmaninoff. I play lots of Beethoven as well. Yeah, I think he's my favorite. I totally get probably.
Yeah. No, I remember reading in a book some like anecdote about Horowitz or somebody like that, and they were saying, you know, do you play any Liszt or whatever? And he was like, well, not really. I think I'm playing Bach and Beethoven and Mozart. Maybe after I do all that, I'll get to Liszt. And then Horowitz was like, that's interesting. I'm doing exactly the opposite. I forget. It might not have been him, but it was an anecdote I read.
Talking of Horowitz, though, if you look more deeply, I think all of the repertoire he performed, it wasn't so big, really, overall.
Right. And the portion of it he played in public.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
A lot more.
Yeah. Because I think, like, he played Rachmaninoff's Third Concerto a lot during his career, and I think he did play the second once when he was a student, I think, and that was the only time he performed it.
Right. And at the same time, he recorded the only, like, solo Bach he ever recorded, not hyphenated Bach, like Bach Busoni or whatever, is the Toccata in C minor. I think it's 911 or something. And it's among the best Bach playing I've ever heard. You know, it's pretty much it's as good as Glenn Gould and more colorful.
Yeah.
So I'm sure he could have played a great well-tempered clavier had he wanted to.
Yeah, but I think it's probably a personality thing. He was probably nervous to add more repertoire to his programs. Instead of like playing the stuff he'd known for a long time. And you hear similar stories about Rubinstein as well, I think.
Totally, yeah, it's true. I mean, I have no idea what it's like to play that huge a career and that big venues and stuff. You know, it's Argerich plays like 3 pieces now. I mean, she plays Beethoven 1, she plays Scarlatti Encore, and then she plays Schumann Concerto.
Yeah.
Although she did just put out that video of Chopin Third Sonata, which is amazing.
Yeah.
But other than that, her repertoire is pretty small, but she plays the pieces better than pretty much anyone on the planet. So.
Yes. And I did see her. I think I told you when we met before. I was fortunate to see her play Prokofiev's Third Concerto in London.
Wow.
In 2009, and that was probably one of the best concerts I've been to ever.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah, I have not heard her live, unfortunately. So.
Yeah, nowadays it could be even harder.
Yeah.
As well.
But that was going back to competitions. That was another competition I did last year. I went to Spain to play at the Vigo competition. It was very difficult to get. There were like 600 people applying, and they chose like 80 people.
Wow.
And the judges were Argerich, Nelson Freire, Tomas Vasari, and Sergio Tiempo, and then some Spanish dude who I think organized. So it was like sort of an all-star jury. And again, I didn't make it to the finals. It was a weird competition, but I was just enthralled to be playing for Argerich. You know, it's like, oh my god, I can't believe she's actually listening to me play. It's sort of a surreal moment in time.
Yeah, I mean, you have that, and then you still have to like forget about that as well at the same time, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah, you can't. I mean, I probably shouldn't have had that approach and just play the piano, you know, like whatever. I remember I took off my glasses, specifically, I think because they do tend to fall off when I play, but I also I did not want to see her, like when if I looked out in the jury, like I would see them sitting somewhere, and without my glasses, I just see like a blur for the audience.
Okay.
So I deliberately did that. I just took my bow, sit and play, and try to forget that like she's sitting there, you know, listening.
Yes.
So, but it was an odd competition, you know. The guy that made actually all of the finalists were having major problems memory-wise. I was kind of disappointed.
Yes.
And one of them played the Beethoven 110, and they had to start the fugue like 5 times.
Ooh.
And you know, it's a very difficult piece, like memory-wise. I know it's one of the more slippery things to memorize, but I think a lot of people were practicing the first and second rounds and not their final round. Let's just put it that way. Because I heard that same person play a very solid Scriabin Fifth Sonata, and I could understand them making the finals. But then I heard them in the final, and I couldn't believe, like, oh my god.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because when I went to New York, I met some pianists, and I'm not going to name any, but I did speak to a few, and they were saying like, "Oh, I don't have the the obligatory piece. You know, there was a piece composed for the competition that we had to learn. I think 40 days before we had 40 days to learn, and some of them were saying, "Oh, I still haven't memorized it yet," and this was like the first day." And I was like, "What?" Because I myself spent like weeks preparing and everything to do the best I could as well. So I don't understand it really, that mentality.
Yeah. I mean, the only time I did anything close to that was so last year I did a lot of competitions. In May I did there was a Malta competition called 14 Ways to Malta.
Yes.
And they had 14 competitions. I wonder what happened with that competition, actually. This coronavirus must have totally messed it up.
Yeah, I'd love to go there, actually.
It was like 14 satellite competitions all over the world leading up to this big Malta one in 2021.
Oh, wow.
And one of them was in Washington, D.C. That was probably like the only American part of it. So I made the semifinals, and you had to play what is it called? They had similar, like a commission piece by this Maltese composer. Yes. Not a very good piece in my opinion. The set, like I didn't know what the deal was with this stuff, but anyway.
Yes.
I don't think anybody had much time to learn it, and I think we were all. I could hear everybody in the practice rooms, like we're all frantically trying to get this piece down.
I mean, I can understand, because I didn't have all the days we got to learn it, because I was in England for a family wedding at the time, so I wasn't practicing for probably 2 weeks as well that time.
Yeah. So I mean, you do your best. It wasn't great music, but my teacher was like, you know what, try to make it sound better than it is.
Yes.
So that's what great artists can do. So.
Great. So I think I've got just one more question for you today. Then, so what future plans do you have after everything is open again, and hopefully venues will be able to continue doing concert series and everything? It might not be exactly the same, but there'll be something happening at least.
Yeah, it's a great question, and to be honest, I've been avoiding it somewhat by retreating into my Goldberg variation practice, and all these. I've sort of taken the approach of this being a good time for self-improvement and studying and just learning, rather than being so eager to just start live streaming my concerts. But now I think that is going to be something I need to tackle, like whether I'm doing research right now on just like buying a microphone for starters.
Oh yeah.
Because I think I need something better than just my phone mic. Although I get mixed opinions on that. So yeah, I would like to start streaming some more, things from my apartment. Maybe getting into a recording studio if I can find one that's open.
Yes.
But I think more importantly, I would say collaboration is something I want to do more of. I don't know if it's possible to play chamber music online yet because of the time delay, but I'd be interested to try something like that.
Yeah.
As well as working with composers I know. Getting back to my interest in contemporary music, I do have a few composers in mind that I'd like to, either commission a work for them or, see what they have written for piano and start learning it. I have a couple projects sort of, pending with new music,
Yes.
So that's something I want to focus on. I feel like, in a way, there's so many people trying to play the classics, Chopin, etc., that the better way to make a niche for yourself is to, do new music or to compose yourself. I do have ambitions to compose, but I never really finished anything. I wrote a few pieces since the coronavirus started because I had so much time on my hands.
Yes.
But I'm not really a composer. I feel like better, leave that to the pros and try to work with people whose music I like to play.
Yeah. I mean, I remember that even in college, one of my teachers said we need to get away from starting the recital with a Bach or Mozart piece, really.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I love the music. We all do. It's almost like an addiction to want to play, the Chopin etudes as well as XYZ, name your piano hero. But it's sort of like a first-class ticket to nowhere in your career. I'm not necessarily true. I mean, there are other pianists, for example, Marc-Andre Hamelin, one of the greatest living pianists. He sort of made his name playing off the beaten path composers and underrated, Alkan, Cottoir, Kapustin, Mettner, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But now he's playing mainstream rep. It's almost like it's not a path everyone has to take, but I started thinking, well, maybe I should, do something more off the beaten path, and then later on, if I make a name for myself, then I can play, Bach.
Yeah, I think that's probably to do with because he has his audience as well. So there's going to be people who love whatever he plays, really.
Right, yeah. It's funny though. He's great, but he's been sort of rebranded as a mainstream repertoire person. I remember I was reading on Carnegie Hall. He's like, Marc-Andre Hamelin is acclaimed for his interpretations of the mainstream piano repertoire. And I'm like, they're erasing history. He did the Busoni concerto and all these things that nobody plays.
Well, the first time I saw him in the UK, he was actually playing Sanson's Second Concerto, one of the most famous, popular standard concertos, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, for sure. I love the piece. Great piece.
Yeah, and it's a great piece for him and his technique, I think.
Oh yeah,
really.
I'm sure the last movement was sizzling. The tarantella.
Well, one thing I remember though is when he walked on stage, he actually slipped and he nearly tripped over, and then there was a kind of gasp in the audience. But then, as soon as he sat down, he just started, and nothing happened. Really.
Wow. Jeez. Yeah, that can really rattle your nerves when you play it. I mean, playing concertos can be nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
But, one of your questions, I think, was what format of performing do you enjoy the most? And I have to say, the few times the concertos have been the rarest, but they've also been some of the highlights of my musical life.
Yeah, I agree.
Playing the Tchaikovsky first concerto in 2010 was one of the best experiences I've had, for sure.
Yeah, and similar to that, I think one of my very favourite performances was doing Rachmaninoff's Paganini Rhapsody.
Right.
And that was my second time playing with orchestra, so I think it just makes you work very hard and prepare. You almost over prepare, I think, because you get this opportunity.
Yeah.
And you just want to do the best, don't you, really?
Yeah, it's really incredible. I mean, of course, the music is some of the best ever, you know. But also there is a collaborative element, sometimes almost like chamber music when you're trying to coordinate with, you know, a flute line or a horn or something. And, you know, it's just the electricity of the moment, you know, working with the conductor. And, you know, I love playing concertos. So
I remember that for that Rachmaninoff, I was lucky enough to have almost like 3 rehearsals before the concert.
Oh, that's great.
Which you don't, most times you'll get 1 a lot of the time, don't you? So,
yeah, 1.5.
Yeah.
Right. Totally. That's what I had for the Beethoven triple, and the triple was quite difficult to put together.
Yes.
I have to say. Yeah. So.
Well, yeah, I think that's been great. So thank you so much for your time today, Eric.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, this has been a pleasure. It's been great fun chatting. Yeah.
Yeah,
thanks for having me.
Just a bonus question: where can everybody find you on the internet, on social media?
Oh, let's see. What's the best way to put it? I think on YouTube, the link is a little bit complicated to say. It's youtube.com/Eric Clark Pianist 1 for some reason. But if you just Google Eric Clark Piano, you'll find my channel relatively easily.
I'm sure YouTube. If you type that in YouTube, you'll come up, really.
Yeah. I don't know if Periscope, do you have a website? I have a very funny handle. This people will probably remember because my brother made it for me as a joke, and he never changed it.
I know what it is, but tell us.
My Twitter handle is @Clarkolicious.
Yes.
So, you know, it's ridiculous. I should change it, but that's where you can find me on Twitter.
Yeah, there is a way. If you go to periscope.tv and then put / in the username, that's the way to find profiles normally.
Oh, okay. That's good to know. Yeah. And my website is ericclarkpianist.com, but it needs a little bit of updating. So, you know, but you can find some basic info there, some recordings, some recent performances.
That's great.
I would say YouTube's probably the best place to find my stuff.
Cool.
At the moment.
Well, I will. This is going to go on YouTube anyway, so I'll put those links underneath.
Oh, great. That's awesome.
As well.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, thank you. So, thank you everybody who's joined today live and everybody on the replay.